You are standing in front of a golden door. Not metaphorically, literally. The door is gold, the walls are gold, and the statue looming above the entrance, 120 feet of gilded bronze, wears your emperor's face. Rome, 65 CE. You have been summoned, not invited. Summoned. And everyone in this city knows what happens to people who make the emperor wait. You have also heard what happens to people he decides to keep. The torches are already burning when you arrive. That is wrong. Nero's dinners never begin before the lamps have burned for 3 hours. It is ritual, a demonstration that his time exists outside ordinary hours. But the torches are lit now, which means either you are late, or Nero changed the hour without telling you. Both of those things are tests. Only one of them is survivable. You step through the vestibule. You do not look up at the statue. You learnt that early. Inside, the smell arrives before anything else does. Roses and sulphur. The perfume pipes embedded in the corridor walls are running. A mechanism that pushes scented air through ivory ceiling panels that open and close like breathing. Petals fall from above, landing on empty floor. The dinner has not started. Someone else is already here. You hear laughter. A calibrated laughter. The kind that knows it is being monitored. The music stops the moment you enter the room. Every face turns, and Nero is not at the table. Nero is standing directly in front of the door, as if he has been there for a while, as if he knew exactly when you would arrive. He smiles. He says your name. If you want the history they buried under bathhouses and renamed into art movements, subscribe. Because what happened inside this building has been hiding in plain sight for 2,000 years. Now let's establish what we actually know, because the version of this story most people carry is missing its most important chapters. The Great Fire of Rome burned for 6 days and 7 nights in July of 64 CE. 3 of the city's 14 districts were destroyed entirely. 7 more were gutted. Hundreds of thousands of people lost everything. Ancient chroniclers, writing within living memory, document the scale as total catastrophe. Did Nero start the fire? Modern historians are genuinely skeptical. The evidence does not support a clean verdict. But here is the part that requires no speculation, because Tacitus records it with the precision of a man who understood exactly what he was witnessing. Within weeks of the last ember dying, Nero seized the land, not to rebuild, not to restore, to take. Between 100 and 300 acres in the heart of the city, urban neighbourhoods, sacred groves, public spaces where Roman citizens had lived for generations, were absorbed into a single imperial construction zone. The people who had lived there were displaced. Tacitus names the mechanism. It was framed as civic renewal, but it functioned as confiscation. Nero called what he built there the Domus Aurea, the Golden House. Suetonius records that when the construction was finally complete, Nero walked through it and said, "Good. Now I can finally begin to live like a human being." That line gets quoted as eccentricity. It should be quoted as a threat, because what Nero considered human, what he believed he was owed, is exactly what made the Golden House something other than a palace. The construction required not just stolen land, it required people, thousands of them, and the historical record is almost completely silent about what those people were asked to do once they were inside. Almost. To understand what Nero built, you have to understand what he was dismantling. Every emperor before him had operated under a carefully maintained fiction. After the emperor was the princeps, the first citizen, powerful but technically still a Roman among Romans. Augustus lived modestly by aristocratic standards. He attended Senate sessions, he deferred in public to republican forms. The performance of humility was itself a form of control. It kept the aristocracy cooperative, kept the army loyal, kept the machinery of empire running on consensus. Nero looked at that arrangement and rejected it structurally. The Domus Aurea, confirmed by both archaeology and contemporary chroniclers, contained the following: an artificial lake occupying the valley where the Colosseum would later stand, palace wings stretching from the Palatine Hill to the Esquiline, a vestibule scaled to house his colossal statue, dining rooms with rotating ceilings, baths fed by perfumed seawater, vaulted chambers decorated in gold leaf and mother of pearl, and throughout, painted walls in a style unlike anything Rome had produced before, fantastical figures, humans dissolving into foliage, into columns, into architecture itself. This was not a home, it was a cosmology. Every room was an argument. The argument was, there is a natural order to the universe, and this, all of this, is simply what that order looks like. The rotating ceiling was the thesis statement. The cosmos revolves. At the center of the cosmos, fixed and radiant, the Emperor. Everyone else is a petal falling from his ceiling. The machine does not ask your opinion, it simply turns. What Nero built was not madness. That is the reframe that changes everything about this story. It was the completely rational conclusion of a man who had decided, for the first time in Roman imperial history, to stop pretending. The Golden House did not reflect a broken mind. It reflected a perfectly coherent worldview, expressed in marble and ivory, an engineered mechanism. The horror was not that Nero lost his grip on reality. The horror was that he never had any confusion about it at all. And into this machine, every night, walked human beings who had been given no meaningful option to refuse. Back inside the dining room, the dinner has begun. The freedman has performed, carefully, precisely, the calibrated performance of a man who has been reading this room for years, not too eager, not too restrained. Nero watches with the expression he reserves for decisions he has already made. The table is arranged so that every face is visible to Nero simultaneously. The freedman noticed this years ago. Nero always knows who is watching him, who is whispering to who laughs a fraction of a second too late. Tonight there is a senator present the freedman does not recognize. Young, careful in a way that means someone warned him recently. He has been laughing at everything since the first course. He has not stopped once. After the performance, Nero calls the freedman to sit beside him, an honor. In the internal logic of this court, this registers as an honor. Nero speaks quietly. The intimate register he uses with people he has already categorized. He compliments the performance. He mentions a new composition of his own. He would like the freedman to hear it. Tomorrow, the freedman agrees. There is no architecture in this palace for the word no. On his way out, he passes the senator, who has finally stopped laughing. The expression on the man's face is not envy at the attention the freedman just received. It is not relief that the attention landed elsewhere. It is pity. The freedman walks home through streets built on burned foundations, and realizes he cannot identify the last decision he made that was entirely his own. And here is where the historical record becomes genuinely disturbing, because it removes individual villainy as a sufficient explanation for what was happening inside the Golden House. Under Roman law, a freed person owed their former master a legal obligation called opere, a binding duty of service enforceable by courts. For freedmen attached to the imperial household, those obligations were effectively permanent. Nero did not need to threaten the people who populated his palace. The law had already done it. The law had already decided that their time, their presence, their availability, these belonged to the emperor by default as a matter of legal architecture, not personal cruelty. But it went further than that. Contemporary chroniclers document what the atmosphere of Nero's court actually produced in practice. An accusation arrived without warning. Defense was functionally impossible. Between execution and exile, the timeline was measured in days. The year 65 CE alone saw the forced deaths of over a dozen senators and knights, men of the highest Roman standing, eliminated through a mechanism so efficient it barely registered as violence. It registered as administration. This is what modern scholars of coercive systems recognize as a specific and deliberate environment. Unpredictable enforcement, total surveillance, the performance of devotion as the only viable survival strategy, and for most corrosively, the gradual erosion of the capacity to distinguish between genuine feeling and performed feeling. When you have smiled at a man's jokes long enough to stay alive, you eventually lose access to what your real response would have been. Suetonius records something that sounds almost absurd until you hold it still long enough to understand it. Nero would sometimes lock the doors during his performances and not permit anyone to leave. People reportedly faked illness to escape. Women gave birth rather than ask to be excused. The detail that stays with you is not the locked doors, while it is that people calculated, carefully, rationally, that feigning death was a safer option than honest absence. The Domus Aurea was that locked room, made permanent, made architectural, made into a place you were summoned to live inside. And then the Pisonian conspiracy collapsed, and everything the Golden House had always been became visible at once. April 65 CE. A senatorial plot to remove Nero has been discovered. Names are being delivered to the palace. The purge has begun. What is striking, what Tacitus documents with the precision of a man who understood he was recording something historically singular, is the quality of Nero's response. It was not rage, it was not panic, it was systematic, it was calm, it was in its own way architectural. Seneca, and Nero's former tutor and the greatest philosophical mind of his era, was ordered to choose his own end. He did. Lucan, the poet, the same. The General Corbulo received his condemnation by letter while commanding troops in the east. He understood immediately. He fell on his own sword before the messenger had left the camp. And then there was Petronius, Nero's former arbiter of taste, the man who had curated the aesthetic of the Golden House, the author of the Satyricon. Petronius composed a farewell letter, documented by Tacitus, that listed, methodically, every act of depravity he had witnessed Nero commit inside the palace walls. He named participants, he named locations, he sealed the letter and sent it to the Senate. Then he chose his own end. Petronius had understood something that our freedman is only now beginning to grasp. Standing in a corridor of the Golden House with the sounds of the purge arriving from somewhere deeper inside the building. The palace was not just a residence, it was not just a cosmology, it was a blackmail machine. What happened inside its walls, the performances required, the humiliations witnessed, the loyalty demonstrations enacted under that rotating ceiling, was information. And information, in Nero's court, functioned as a permanent leash. The freedman has been inside these rooms. He has witnessed what Petronius described. He is not a servant. He is a liability who is kept alive precisely because his silence is worth more than his absence. Above him, the ceiling begins to turn. Petals fall on empty floor. He now understands the palace completely, and the understanding offers no exit. The next morning, the freedman returns, as commanded. The room is nearly empty. Only a handful of trusted court attendants remain along the walls. The rotating ceiling is still. Nero is seated with a lyre, positioned in the posture of an artist rather than an emperor, which the freedman has learned to recognize as the most dangerous configuration of this man. When Nero performs as emperor, there are rules, protocols. The power is visible, which means its boundaries are also visible. When Nero performs as artist, the rules dissolve. The artist is vulnerable. The artist requires honesty, and honesty in this room is the one thing that has no safe form. Nero plays for nearly an hour. The composition is long. It moves through several distinct phases. Something resembling grief at the opening, then a structural shift into something that sounds almost like justification, then a final movement that reaches for transcendence and nearly achieves it. The most disorienting thing is that it is not bad. There is genuine feeling inside it. It is a composition about loss and fire, and the painful necessity of clearing away what is insufficient so that something true can rise in its place. It is, the freedman realizes slowly, Nero's private account of the fire, his version, as the one where burning the city down was an act of artistic vision. When the final note ends, the room is completely silent. Nero looks directly at the freedman. He asks what he thinks. 13 years of court service compress into this single moment. The freedman understands the trap with total clarity. An honest critique, even a gentle one, lands as an attack on the emperor's self-image, and that is an accusation this court has never survived. But hollow praise carries its own danger. Nero has an artist's acute contempt for people who cannot hear, and being identified as a flatterer is its own category of failure, its own quiet door that closes. There is only one answer that threads between those two ends. The freedman says that no one else could have written it. This is true. It is completely, literally true. It avoids evaluation entirely. It is not praise of the work. It is acknowledgement of the man, which is the only currency this court has ever actually traded in. Nero smiles. He says, "Come back tomorrow." The freedman bows. He turns. Behind him, he hears the sealing mechanism engage, the slow grinding rotation beginning again, the apparatus of the cosmos restarting. He does not look up. He walks out through the corridor, past the ivory panels cycling open and closed, past the perfume pipes breathing their scented air into empty space. Outside, in the city, built on top of the lives of the people the fire displaced, he stops walking. He stands in the street. And for a moment that he will not describe to anyone, he cannot locate his own name. Not because he has forgotten it, because the version of himself that owns that name, the version that has preferences, that makes choices, that exists independently of this palace and this emperor, that version has been so thoroughly replaced by the version that survives that he can no longer find the seam between them. June 68 CE, 3 years later. The seam has finally torn, but not for the freedman, for the emperor. The Senate has declared Nero an enemy of the state. His guards abandoned their posts in the night. His court dissolved within hours. He fled the palace with a handful of attendants and took shelter in a freedman's house on the outskirts of the city. And the historical irony of that location is not subtle. The man who required a universe to feel adequately housed ended his life in a borrowed room. Suetonius records what followed with the unflinching precision of a chronicler who understood he was documenting a specific kind of ending. Nero spent his final hours asking whether there was no one who would die alongside him. The question received no answer. He composed a fragment, reportedly, 4 words that functioned as both epitaph and accusation: "What an artist dies in me." The rotating ceiling had always required other people to function. It required engineers. It required guests. It required an audience whose presence confirmed the cosmology, because a universe inhabited by only one person is not a universe. It is a room. It is just a room. When the audience left, the mechanism stopped. The ceiling was just wood and rope and counterweights. Nothing celestial about it. Nero required his secretary Epaphroditus to assist him in ending his own life, because even that final act was beyond his capacity to perform alone. He died asking whether he was conducting himself with appropriate dignity, the central question this story has been carrying since the beginning. What happens to the people trapped inside a man's manufactured reality resolves here with a precision that feels almost designed. The people got out. The man who built the reality could not survive its absence. The prison turned out to have only ever had one permanent resident, and he had never noticed. The palace stood empty. Its contents were looted within days. But the things that had happened inside it, the identities slowly replaced by survival performances, the witnessed acts that became permanent leverage, the choices that were not choices, those had nowhere to go. The Senate moved quickly. Within months of Nero's death, the formal machinery of erasure engaged. Damnatio Memoriae, the condemnation of memory, was declared, and his images were ordered destroyed. His name was chiselled from public inscriptions. His acts were to be unmade wherever the law could reach them. Vespasian, the new emperor, drained Nero's artificial lake and broke ground on a public amphitheatre directly on top of it. The Colosseum, one of the most visited structures in human history, is built on the precise footprint of the private indulgence it was designed to erase. The symbolism was deliberate and total. What the emperor had stolen from the people, a new emperor was returning. The crowds would gather where the lake had been. The gesture would be understood. Trajan built his baths on top of the palace's northern wing. Workers packed the interior rooms with rubble, sealed the corridors and built upward. Within a generation, the Golden House had ceased to exist above ground, and the city moved on top of it. But here is what the Damnatio Memoriae could not reach: the freedmen of Nero's court, the performers, the enslaved attendants, the senators who had survived years of dinners beneath that rotating ceiling by performing devotion with sufficient precision. Their experience was never classified as atrocity. It was never given a formal name. It was absorbed into the general historical record as imperial eccentricity. Nero was excessive, everyone acknowledged this, certain things occurred. And then it was smoothed over with the same efficiency the workers used to pack rubble into his dining rooms. The victims of the Golden House received no damnatio memoriae, they received something quieter and more complete. They received erasure without acknowledgement. Their suffering was not condemned, whilst it was simply never fully named. Underground, in sealed rooms, no one would enter for 1500 years. The painted walls held. The ceiling mechanism sat frozen mid-rotation. Everything the Senate had declared destroyed was perfectly, silently intact. In the late 1480s, a young Roman fell through a crack in the earth on the Oppian Hill and found himself inside a cave covered in paintings. Word spread. Artists came. They were lowered on ropes into what they believed were ancient grottos, the Italian word grotta giving them the only name they had for what they had found. Raphael descended. Michelangelo left his name scratched into one of the ceilings, which archaeologists confirmed centuries later. What these artists encountered was unlike anything visible above ground. Fantastical figures, architectural illusions, human forms dissolving into foliage and columns and decorative borders, bodies becoming ornament, people becoming pattern. They called the style grotesque. We compressed it into a single word, grotesque. It entered French, English, German, Spanish. It travelled through 4 centuries of art criticism and eventually settled into ordinary language, where it now describes something distorted, something that violates the expected dignity of human form, something that treats personhood as raw material for spectacle. The painters who named it did not know whose rooms they were in. They did not know what those rooms had been used for. They found an aesthetic vocabulary for a particular kind of violation and borrowed it completely, not understanding that that violation was the point. The style was not decorative excess. It was a visual record of what the Golden House required of every human body that passed through it. Dissolution, incorporation, the slow replacement of a person with a surface, what Tacitus documented, what the Senate buried, like what popular history reduced to fiddles and fire, none of it disappeared. It came back the way suppressed things always do, through a side entrance, wearing a borrowed name. Somewhere beneath the baths of Trajan, in rooms partially open to visitors today, the painted figures are still fading. People dissolving slowly into the walls they were always meant to decorate. The mechanism that once turned the ceiling is still embedded in the stonework. It has not moved in nearly 2,000 years. We named that dissolution. We built an entire aesthetic tradition on top of it. We just forgot, somewhere along the way, what we were actually looking at. If this is the kind of erased, buried, deliberately forgotten history you want more of, subscribe and leave a comment telling us which empire's hidden story you want uncovered next. But the ones they tried hardest to bury are always the most revealing.